Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4. This week, our theme is reading different genres, how to approach those pieces, and also what rhetorical analysis is. For the first part here, I'll focus more on rhetorical analysis. Towards the end of the video, we'll learn a bit more about genre. In a sense, a rhetorical analysis is being extremely picky and persnickety about why a piece of writing or a document exists. And it really is this examination of how writers use language. This can look like word choices, the structure, simple, compound, complex sentences, and what the overall tone is, how the appeals to emotion are landing, style, tone, how we connect with others, the words we choose, the references we make, the jargon that we include or exclude. At the very core of this, it's unpacking what was this person's intention when they created this document. And when I say document, I mean an advertisement, a commercial on TV, an instruction manual, a proposal, a poster on a gas station wall. What was the intention behind creating that item in the way in which it was made? In our day-to-day life, we can definitely acknowledge we live in a very media-saturated society. We are inundated with this mass-mediated content. And an interesting study that was conducted in 2023 from the University of Southern California, this is more on the conservative end, but on average, Americans approximately are exposed to 5,000 advertisements a day. Other studies that have been conducted recently suggest that is closer to 10,000, but we'll stick to the lower end. And this looks like advertisements when you are scrolling on your phone in the morning, driving past billboards, posters on the wall at your office. Compared to 50 years ago, back in the 70s, the average was 500. We are constantly being exposed to advertisements, mass-mediated content, and people trying to sell us stuff. And if we take a look at this in a cultural perspective, we really are seeing a disparity in quantity versus quality of a lot of things that we see and are bombarded with. When we take a look at context and some constraints, and this is from the chapter of the text this week, definition, context refers to other direct or indirect factors that likely influence the writer, the text, and audience in a particular situation. Last week, I talked a little bit about schema and how for the last 18 plus years of our lives, nobody else has encountered the same people, courses, clubs, organizations, and traveled to the same places that we have. That is a unique human experience specific to us. And when we take a look at where other people are coming from when they create documents, or where people are coming from when they read the documents that we create, these are all at play. Social, this is what we've been exposed to, how our friend groups work, how our conversations with others go, our sense of humor, how we navigate those social spaces. Cultural aspects of our identity. And this could refer to maybe what the expectation of somebody is, maybe around the holidays, with certain cultural dishes, traditions that they might have that might be unique to family or specifically to people from that background. Geographic, of where we grew up, what we have been exposed to. Living in rural Michigan for the majority of someone's life is going to be a very different experience than someone living in the heart of New York City. And when we talk about commutes to work or something vague like that, the image that people have in their mind's eye based on where they grew up might be different. And then political context as well, of what values are we speaking to that have maybe been ingrained since we have been kids, that maybe are related to religious practices. What are those values that make up what or how we think we should operate in society? So it's important to acknowledge everyone has context, and when we create documents or are engaging with documents, we can't disregard the person behind that document, who created it, what the intention was. So when we think about why a text exists, this can be a creative piece. This could be a directional map. It could be a sign on a door that says maximum occupancy, X amount of people. And if we think about why that text, that document, that sign, that advertisement exists, this is a rhetorical analysis. What is this really speaking to? What has moved this writer to create the text? Why is the discourse needed right now? Is there some other factors at play that might suggest why this poster or this advertisement was needed at the moment? Is there a perceived need, a problem that it's trying to address? Ultimately, is there some kind of call to action that instigates a response from audience members? Vote a certain way, buy this product, consider a different perspective. What ultimately is that text doing? Is it signifying, hey, this is a policy for safety reasons? Hey, we have a new type of Cheez-It, try now. Why does it exist? And when we are inundated with thousands of messages, articles, and advertisements a day, we don't go through this process for every single advertisement. But taking that step back, slowing down a bit, that's a good way that we can consider this intention a bit more and get critical. Some folks might have been exposed to Aristotle's appeals. These are the three persuasive appeals that have been linked to Aristotle. And this language appears pretty frequently in higher education: ethos, pathos, and logos appeals. Ethos is somebody's personal credibility. This could include why they are qualified to speak on a certain subject based on years of experience, degrees, certificates, and their personal character as well. This can look like a politician's voting record, somebody's perceived honesty and integrity, making the quote unquote right decision in a difficult situation. It's that credibility that this person is qualified to speak on a certain item. The pathos is those appeals to the heartstrings. And this can look like appeals to emotion. Consider if this was you. Creativity, imagination, speaking to that human experience more so, what those relationships look like with others. Logos, logic, it appeals to data, statistics, here are the actual numbers, the research that was conducted. And we can see here that a good mix of all three of these, someone stands a pretty good chance of creating a solid argument if they're able to talk about why they are qualified to speak on this and why they have demonstrated that they are an honest and reputable person. If they're also talking about other people, that issue of community and humanity, coupled with some statistics, these are the hard and fast outcomes. By combining all three of those, we stand a good chance at influencing others, or at least creating a statement that will help people consider our perspective. If we take a look at this passage here, we have all three appeals in this caption for this picture. And we see here in the very first sentence, as a seasoned hiker and outdoor enthusiast, that would be that ethos appeal, that personal credibility. The person who is authoring this caption for the photo this is not their first hike. They have some experience being outdoors. They have been on mountains, have been traipsing around trails before. We also see here the pathos appeal. Picture yourself standing atop a majestic mountain peak. We're talking about the breathtaking vistas, the crisp, fresh air. This is that emotional appeal of imagine that you are in this situation, beautiful landscapes, that feeling of awe, looking around at the world. We then have Logos' example right here of the scientific studies consistently show that protecting natural resources and habitats, biodiversity, ecological balance, etc. So we're talking about that science, data, numbers component as well. So this is an example of a caption that would speak to all three of those and how they work together. When we are being critical over an article, a document, a poster that was created, maybe an advertisement that we might scroll through on our newsfeed, it's important that we know the genre. We know what we're talking about. We have some semblance of what the expectation is, what is considered quote unquote good, what is considered not the best in that particular category. The same way, if you watch sports recaps on ESPN or listen to podcasts where maybe people are talking about album reviews or people reviewing television, movies, pop culture, they typically have some experience in that genre, whether they have previously been a musician or a sportscaster or have played that sport. They know what they're talking about. That's that ethos appeal. It's also important to read the counter arguments, especially when we are looking at maybe social issues or policies that we can't imagine why anyone would say no to this. How could somebody not support this? It's important to see that other perspective, because then when folks come back at us and have, this, well, what about this? What about that? We have a better understanding of where that perspective is coming from and how we can talk about it. And it's important too to consult other educated individuals, people who have experience and a solid track record within that genre. They know what they're talking about. It's important to be critical and definitely can be easier said than done. It's a lot easier walking through life, just accepting the things that pop up on our phone and accepting news articles as, oh, yeah, I'm sure it was on the internet. Of course it's true. Rational thinking, intellectual growth, problem solving, these are all tenets of what is important in the workplace and really what's important for somebody to be an informed member of their community. We also, through this process of being nitpicky and very critical, we build up our resilience to misinformation and disinformation. And the difference between these two, misinformation is somebody being misinformed, not having all the facts together, got the wrong information. The intention is typically not to confuse or bamboozle anyone. It's, whoops. Disinformation, on the other hand, is amplifying and perpetuating falsified or unverified content. And it's important that we do have that healthy level of skepticism in us, but to also consider, okay, if we're looking back at what makes criteria for something that passes academic standards, is this meeting those expectations? So with genres, as we start the first paper, it is a personal narrative. And if we take a look at genre, it's a category or type of a text. This could also be within music, literary, etc. But there are a certain set of conventions and expectations that are shared by a community. What makes something an effective scary movie or an effective folk album? It depends on the expectations of that fan base and conventions that have been previously set. Where if we are flipping through radio channels, we can pretty quickly identify if something is indie rock versus country based on that set of conventions, what instruments are used, what language is used, sonically, what's going on. And these genres can be broad or specific. Essay, speeches, articles, there's a lot of room for interpretation. And when we take a look at specific genres like a research paper or editorials, memos, lab reports, these often have a prescribed formula that we must follow. And we could also lump emails in this as well, referencing the article or the 2 assignments that you've already completed this semester of these are the staunch expectations of email at the college level. We see genre all the time in our lives, whether it's in the workplace, in education settings, and then just in our personal lives. And in the workplace specifically, it might be taking messages, emails, files, following a specific set of conventions. That's probably what your employer is expecting, and that's been the standard that's set. In education, same story. There might be some opportunities for some creativity depending on what that situation is, but oftentimes with like a research paper, lab report, emails, there are those expectations going into it. We have a lot more creativity outside of school and work. And with our own social media posts, creative pursuits, comments, text messages we send to friends, we have a lot more flexibility and availability to be creative and express oneself without the confines of what employers or instructors have set for expectations. And these are predictable and recurring kinds of communication. That's what genres are at the very core. And who on earth makes these rules? Often the people who are in charge, and largely because it's been done that way before. A memo or the structure of a lab report, when we're taking a look at those documents, we can scan them pretty easily because we know what to expect. Memos should be pretty short. We see short paragraphs, we see the to, the from, the subject. And it's an expectation, even if we don't have our glasses on, we can tell at a glance, yes, that's a memo based on the format. And with this, a lot of this comes back to what's reinforced by institutional power structures. And in the chapter this week, a bit more is said about this, but it's what is amplified of this is the expectation on how to write a scholarly journal article, or hey, this is a creative writing pursuit, do whatever you want. So it really just depends on the situation, expectations, and ultimately who is in charge. And as we take a look at the genre of narrative, this is what you are working on for your first paper in this course. And a personal narrative, really to understand a genre, we should be familiarized with it. We should read some examples first before we dive head in. And I am going to link below this video this link to the New York Times article. In 2020, they ran a contest for students to submit a narrative. The expectations of this were write a story about your life. There should, and I have this passage here, feel free to read it, of why out of 8,000 submissions, why these 8 rose to the top out of this contest. So people read thousands and thousands of narratives. The 8 that were selected, there was something about these essays. And as you take a look at a couple of them, they're pretty short. They're approximately 600 words each. And as you take a look at that, look at dialogue, sentence structure, word choice, and the ultimate narrative arc. And this might be a bit of a throwback to previous English or creative writing courses. That narrative arc is that beginning, middle, and end. How do we start off with that exposition? This maybe is talking about the setting, the characters, that solid introduction. What is the conflict or central point of that story? Is this an internal struggle, external struggle with somebody else? And then ultimately, how is this wrapped up? Even if it's not wrapped up with a bow on top and a happily ever after, there should be some kind of reflective component. And as you take a look at some of those narrative essays, you'll notice that pattern. And oftentimes these are ordinary situations, but the person chose to write about it in a way that was new or very specific to them. So here are some of the articles. These are the titles of the essays that you'll read. Pick a couple. You'll notice these are very short. I've read all of them. I think that they definitely were chosen for a reason. And before you start to draft your narrative essay, you'll submit an idea to Canvas. 2 sentences about what experience you're thinking about writing for the 3-page narrative paper. 3 pages double spaced, just throwing that out there too. So as you engage with this genre, we'll talk a little bit more next week about some other expectations regarding narrative, how to build up some sensory information, how to make it engaging. But this is a good place to start, just to have a solid understanding of what's expected. And that is it for this lecture. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to reading your work. Thank you.